are again. So let's go actually start making our components a little more personal, a little more interesting. We're going to do some different kind of what I call looping here. It's also kind of a reusability. We're just exploring some of the different things that you can do when you're rendering with JSX and these variables. And events. These are two key things, I think, that are crucial when you're going to mess around in React. So this is all crazy, lots of different stuff that you're doing in components. You have these methods like lifecycle ones that we were talking about last time, like the component did mount or the render. Interface is being updated now in React, and you're going to just see how this is. The interface will get dynamically rendered whenever a certain variable called state is changed within React. We're going to go into that more, but I just want to throw it out there because we need to get our head into this kind of language. And rendering, as we saw, that's one of the functions. Binding, this is a term to make sure that all our various functions that we create are attached properly to the component so that they can pass data and they can really be a part of the component. And we're going to explore. It's going to make a lot more sense when you just do it. And multiple components. We're going to be able to render components within components within components, and it is totally crazy. Yeah. So why don't we just go, and this is going to be a little bit more code than we've done before. And that's good, because code is why we're here. So here within the render component, we have just rendered some HTML, and it's pretty basic. Why don't we just pretty it up just a little bit. Alright, so here we are back in our component, and we have just our old lifecycle method, component did mount, and we're just rendering some basic contents, nothing very special here. So I have gone and just modified styles a little bit. I was just playing around, but I'm going to set it back to the way it was for us. So there we have hi and hello on the sides. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to make another component, and we're going to render it inside this component using an import statement. So just copy everything. So Control A, Control C, or just directly copy. We're going to create a new file. So you can go to however you create your new files. I'm just going to paste that in. I'm just going to give it a different name. So right now it's called app. That's the name of this particular component. So I'm just going to call it name component. Whatever. You can call it whatever you want. It's good to give your file the same name. And we're just going to, you know what, we're going to make another file in here, another folder. We're going to call it components, because that's what you're always going to see when you're working on React projects. And we're just going to just put name component in that for now. We may reorganize this a little more later, but for now, this is fine. So this is identical to the other component, so let's make it just a little different, and I'm just going to put my name in there. Again, this is very simple. We're not doing anything really dynamic here. It's just to illustrate. We also need to change this to match these two. And you will get errors about these if you fail to do it. Now, just doing this, saving the file, and here it is, nothing changes because we didn't actually change our original app.js file. We didn't import anything. We just made a new file and saved it. So that's nothing. So we're going to kind of copy a little bit the way that this is done, but this import library is a little bit tough to get used to at first. It is something you're going to have to play around with. At the end of the day, it's very useful, but as you use libraries in React, there's going to be slightly different ways that you import. So just be aware that it is a little bit tricky, and it's okay if you have a few difficulties with it at first. Now we're going to import that component. So I'm going to say import name component, and we're from, and that's how to refer to the current directory. I'm going to say components. My spelling is a problem. And then name component, and you don't need to put the .js. And there you go. So we have this. Let's just save. Oh, sorry. Let's just save that and see if it still renders. Oh, fails to compile. Oh, we have a problem. So this is really great. When really great to get an error. That's what the developer says. This is trying to import our same app. So that just tells you it's trying to get it from the same folder. So we're just going to get rid of that and the logo because we don't need those. And you know what? We're going to get rid of them from the original as well, since that's generally not how we're going to be doing this kind of thing. So here we go. Now we're all loading, it's fine, and we have our name component, but it's still not in the actual thing. So instead of putting, because remember, it's going to render a div with a p tag with my name in it. So I'm just going to put it right here instead. And you can, it's basically serving like HTML now. It's a little weird to get used to. You have to close it, or what typically people do is they close it like that, the same way as the image tag. If you try just putting it in, we're going to get a render error. There it is again. So let's try just boom, putting it right in. There we go, it renders, and there's my name. Now my name is not written anywhere in this app.js, it's in the name component. So when we make a new one, you mostly just copy the code that is here. You don't need to worry about really understanding all these things that's going on. Just make sure you change these two names, do what you need, and again, you'll notice both of them component did mount. When they mount, we're getting a console log. So if this is working, we should get two, and there they both are. And one is from name component, and one is from app.js. It's a little interesting. This one renders first, or mounts first, I should say. Doesn't necessarily render first. But so it is. It doesn't really make a difference to us. So now we're going to move on a little bit in this, because that's an important aspect of using React. But there's also another fairly straightforward piece that I thought would fit into this somewhat more complicated set of using React, and that is doing a little bit of event handling. So we can pass, and we're gonna explore more about different ways we can write this in coming videos. But why don't we make something like a button? So we'll just make a button and write press me, and that's great. And presumably nothing will happen when we click this. I'd be very surprised. Good. I do not have to make a new career. Okay, so that's what it is there. Great, awesome, fun. Why don't we try putting this inside and see what happens if I put two name components. Oh man, now it's all messy because there's like a div inside the button and it's screwing up the styles. But you know what? It still clicks and it has my name, and yeah, React is awesome. So you can see how it's that's useful already. Not in this case, but you could reuse someone's name, or you could reuse some information, or a little profile picture or something, a layout. So now we're going to actually add an event. So it's not that different than your old on-click event that you'd use in normal HTML that people don't even really use anymore because we all use JavaScript. But this is how we write them in general, and you're going to have the same for on hover. I believe it's on mouse over, like that. Why don't we look? No, we all know the events. We're gonna get into them as we go along. We don't need to look that up. I have faith in you. So now there's a few ways that you can pass the actual event in. You'll see that I've already made it have a couple curly brackets because ultimately we're kind of passing in a variable. It's going to be a function or the execution of a function. So there's a couple ways that we can do it. One way that we're going to explore a little more in the next section when we talk a little more about ES6 is just using some interesting syntax that you've probably encountered. And just outputting, you can. So this is a little funky looking, and here we are, but this is just telling it this is a function, and this is what you should do. So let's just run that and see what happens when I click. Well, so you can see it's doing something there. Did it 3 times, I clicked 3 times, great. So it is doing that. Now, if this syntax seems a little too weird for you, there is a way to do it that isn't as brief, but it may be more obvious. And so that is to give it a name of a function. So this dot, console log, and now console log is going to have to be actual function because it's not defined anywhere, and this is referring to this component. So we have to actually make a function. So for instance, I've never tried this, but we could run this component did mount because it is a function. So let's just see what happens if I mount it, and then when I click it, it should say mounted, presumably. And it does, which is great. So there we are with component did mount, and that's awesome that that works. But we wanted to do console log, and we just have to make our own little event for it then. And we're just going to write it just like that. And now it is going to be part of this component, and we're going to console log hooray into there. And let's just see if that works. So here we are. Our mounted things are running, and they're just like so many mounted components because we have components and components. And we got hooray, and let's see how much times yay. Okay, so that's fantastic. And now you can imagine we could execute other kinds of stuff in here. We could have if statements, and we're going to have loops, and we're going to have all kinds of fun things going on. And yeah, so that is some basic stuff. And we're going to do one more thing in this section, which is to display a looping variable rather than just a static variable. So in this case, that would be an array. Of course, an array can be a big variety of things, and we're going to go over more complex arrays, like arrays of objects and so on and so forth. But for now, let's just make a very straightforward array, and we're just going to loop over it when we render. So you can imagine this is really useful when it comes to tables or other kinds of lists where you have to display tons of data, and it's just like pieces of the same data, objects. So let's make array equals something very, very straightforward. So welcome to, oh, my typing is a problem, my course. There we go. So there's my array, and now what we're going to actually do is render some other JSX and then render it inside. And we're going to see a couple ways of doing it, and that might have sounded crazy, but let's just go for it. So we're going to do make a new variable. We're going to call it like array to render, and then we're going to loop over the array. We're going to do a for each statement. We're going to function, and there's the, I don't know, word. Let's just make it that. And then into array to render, we're going to push, and this is where it gets crazy, some JSX. So you can actually do all of that. And that's really cool, because now you actually have it inside an array. You're going to have a bunch of this JSX, and it's still going to render as a nice list. So let's see how that ends up looking. And again, we put it in just like how we had put in our name component. Oh, sorry. No, how we had put in here before I hello. So it's just a variable that we're entering in. Welcome to my course. So there it is. Each is a paragraph tag of its own, and they're all rendering, and it's all nice. So that is fantastic. We've gone over in this video components like nesting inside of each other. So this is like a component that goes inside this other component. We've gone over some basic events and just creating a custom event inside a component. We've also just basically gone over a little bit of looping and how to display a loop. So I hope it didn't make you loopy. And in our next section, we're going to go over a bit of syntax that makes this a little smaller, a little faster, and also the kind of funny syntax that we saw in there that you may already be used to, but I'm a little old school and I'm not as used to it, and I think it's important for people to learn. So see you in the next video.